Hi, students. We have a little bit of an off schedule for today and tomorrow. These are our map days. So period 2 will meet on Thursday, period 5, algebra will meet on Friday. But for both days, we will respond thoughtfully to this do now about our reactions. Our objective will be to review the properties of equality, and those are the properties that enable us to solve equations. They enable us to use inverse operations to undo the things that are happening to x or whatever variable is in the equation that allows us to isolate that variable and then solve for that variable. Our central question is, how can I use the properties of equality to undo various operations in an equation in order to isolate the variable? And we're going to watch a video and complete properties of equality assignment. I've got a little bit of a challenge for you today. I want you to solve for x in this equation. So the right side of the equation equals -5, but there's a lot going on the left side. 1/4 times the quantity of 5x plus 16/3 minus 2/3 times the quantity of 3/4 x plus 1/2, and all of that equals -5. So we're going to start working on assessments for Unit 2. We're going to break it up a little differently this time and do a few problems a day. We've started that already, but I want you to do 7 to 12 tonight, and that's in your quiz folder. I really want you to get really solid with these basic algebra basics, basically, the tools that we're building for our algebra toolbox, because then we're going to start using algebra to solve lots of wonderful, wonderful problems. So remember, it's not just knowing your Jedi math tricks, it's about knowing what you do when you use your Jedi math tricks. Keep working hard. Do not get behind. If you are behind, send an email. I'll put together a study group with some of the issues that I see we're having trouble with, some of those skills. So our do now for today is kind of mathy. Why is it sometimes good to count to 10 before you act? So we don't want you to react. We're talking about counting to 10 first before you act. And what is it that happens to your mind and your body and your thought process between number 1 and number 10? I want you to think about that. What happens to you if you stop, if you put a pause on it before you comment? Do you calm down? Do you think of a better way to say something? Think about that and write a couple of sentences about that. So go ahead and pause and think about that right now. Again, our exit ticket, I had a hard time with copy and paste on the numbers that I wrote on this PDF document. So I just said, rewrite and solve the problem in the objectives box above, one step at a time. Yes, you can do it. It's going to maybe take you a couple of tries. Let's look at that again. Here it is. That's our problem for the exit ticket. I think you can do it. The properties of equality that we're going to talk about today will help you. But before we get to those, we're going to talk today about the addition property of equality, the subtraction property of equality, the multiplication property of equality, the division property of equality, and the distributive. And I'm hoping this helps you to be even more confident when you solve equations. So first of all, we have the addition property of equality. And that says that if A equals B, then A, let me use the word then in the middle, then A plus C equals B plus C. Now get a new color, the subtraction property of equality. And please take notes somewhere on your page. I think the more we write, the more we learn. I like to write a little bit every day. Not typing, I actually get a pen. I like pretty gel pens. And the subtraction property of equality tells us that if A equals B, then, can you guess it? A minus C equals B minus C. It's a subtraction property of equality. Now the multiplication property of equality tells us that if A equals B, then A times C, which we can write AC, equals B times C. And remember, we don't need a sign when we multiply. That's the one thing that changes as we get into the higher mathematics. Let's pick a new color, and we'll talk about the division property of equality. Which tells us that if A equals B, then, also, let's not forget, we have a caveat here. A caveat is an important thing we need to know. A cannot equal 0, okay? Then A divided by, hold on guys, it's C that cannot be 0. I'm putting C in the denominator. Remember, our denominators can never equal 0. Then A divided by C equals B divided by C. So let's read that again. The division property of equality, if A equals B and C does not equal 0, then A divided by C equals B divided by C. Remember, we cannot have a 0 denominator. We haven't talked a lot about that yet. We've talked about it a little bit, but we will talk about it some more. And finally, today I want to review the distributive property. Let's get a new color for that. And you've used this already, so it should start to look a little familiar for you. If we have A multiplied by B plus C, that will equal AB plus AC. Now let's look at an example with constant and a variable. If we have 3 multiplied times the quantity of x plus 4, then we will have 3x plus 12. Occasionally, you will find the variable might be on the right side of the quantity in parentheses. It may look like this. Same thing, okay? So you've got A on the right side of the parentheses, but it still equals AB plus AC. Also works when we have negatives and subtractions. So A times the quantity of B minus C will equal AB. Now, remember, this as an invisible positive sign. The B has an invisible positive sign. So that will be the same color as before. Okay, A times the quantity of B minus C equals AB minus AC. And let's do a subtraction with a number and a variable. Let's do 2 times the quantity of 3B minus 4C, which will equal, we have an invisible positive here and here. So 2 times 3 is 6, so that would be 6B minus, because a positive times a negative is a negative, so it would be minus 8C. So that's just a little review on properties. So let's go back to our lesson. And here we go. Are you ready? Pull it down a little bit. We had those properties up there. So our instructions ask us to identify which property justifies each step used to solve the equations below. So at this point, some of you are getting fairly confident with solving the equations. I want to really get you to understand why it is that these things work. So what's happening here? So this is our given equation. These are like proofs, and you'll do a lot of these in geometry. So this is our given, so we write given. So now what have we done next? What enabled us to get from here to here? Well, clearly here it's the distributive property. So I'm going to write distributive property. Okay, now how did we get from step 2 to step 3? Well, we added 18 to both sides. So that's our addition property. I'm going to put EQ for equality. We'll be using a few abbreviations today. What allowed us to get from step 3 to step 4? Well, we divided both sides by 2, which is our, you guessed it, division property of equality. And that's the first one, so we've taken care of that. I hope this is starting to look a little familiar to you. Okay, let's get another color, and we'll do another equation. First, we have our given. So what did we do next? It looks like we subtracted 10 from each side using the subtraction property of equality. And then how did we get from step 2 to step 3? Well, I always say what is happening to x, or in this case, what is happening to m. M is being divided by -3, and in order to isolate m, we multiplied both sides of the equation by -3. So that was the multiplication property of equality. So let's move on to the next one, and let's change our color. Okay, we have our given. They're getting a little more complicated. We have a quantity, 5y minus 1, being divided by 2, and all of that is set equal to 7. And the first thing we did is we want to deal with this fraction, right? So we multiplied both sides by 2. So to get from step 1 to step 2, we use the multiplication property of equality. Now we need to go from step 2 to step 3. Looks like we added 1 to both sides using the addition property of equality. And now, in order to isolate y, we say, what is happening to y? Well, it's being multiplied by 5. And to isolate it, we had to divide by 5. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. In this case, using the division property of equality. And another fine job we've done. Good for us. Moving right along. Okay, try the next ones on your own. And then come back and I'll do them with you. Okay, I hope you tried number 4, 5, and 6 on your own. So let's see what we have here. We have 10k minus 4 equals 2k minus 20. And it looks like we, I know what they did. They subtracted 2k from both sides. And that's how we got from step 1 to step 2. So that's the subtraction property of equality. Now, what do we do to get from step 2 to step 3? It looks like we added 4 to both sides using the addition property. And now we need to isolate that k. K is being multiplied by 8, so we need to divide by 8 to isolate k, and a negative times a positive is a negative. So we used the division property of equality. All right, good job. Let's pick a new color, and let's move on to number 5. So we have 5n minus 42 equals 12n, and it looks like the first thing they did was subtract n from both sides to get 42n equals 7n. So that's the subtraction property of equality. So that took us to the second step. Now we need to go from the second step to the third step, and looks like we need to isolate the n, which is being multiplied by 7. So we need to divide by 7, and whatever we do to one side of an equation or inequality, we do to the other. So since we divided by 7, that would be the division property of equality. And finally, the person who did this problem was very much like me because I like my variables on the left. So we didn't review it just a minute ago, but we have talked about this before. What is it that allows us to say that negative 6 equals n has the same value as n equals negative 6? And that is the symmetric property. Were you able to remember that one? Good for you if you did. All right, another good job for us. So let's keep going. got, looks like 2 more. So let's do number 6. We can do these. They're not hard. Slow and steady. First thing we need to do when we see these parentheses is we need to multiply the quantity on the outside of the parentheses through to the quantity inside the parentheses. And we do that using the distributive property. So that got us from step 1 to step 2. So now it looks like we added 5w to each side of the equation, which got us to negative 3w minus 8 equals negative 50. So that was the addition property of equality. And now it looks like we're about to again use the addition property of equality to add 8 to both sides of the equation. So again, addition property of equality. And finally, because w is being multiplied by negative 3, we have to divide by negative 3, and we do that to both sides of the equation. So that was the division property of equality, which allowed us to isolate w equal to 14. And finally, our last problem of the day, except that you're going to go on and you're going to do that challenging problem in the exit ticket. I know you can do it. I know you'll do great. So let's give us a star for our last one. Let's change the color. Let's use something subtle and gray, very serious for a serious problem. Well, when I see all of this, I know the first thing I need to do is distribute. I need to distribute through these quantities in parentheses. Now here on the right side, I've got an invisible 1 here, guys. Let's not forget that. So it's negative 1 times 3x and negative 1 times negative 34, which here you'll see gives us a plus. So the first thing we're going to do is distribute. Let's say it like we really mean it, okay? Because we're doing it through 2 sets of parentheses there. And then once we've distributed, we've got, let's see, I've got on the right side, I can combine this positive 14 with a negative 16, and that's going to give me negative 2. And on the right side, I can combine positive 5x minus 3x, and that will give me this 2x here. So what I did there was I combined like terms. Keep practicing with those positives and negatives, guys. Okay, now that took us to step 3. We need to move on to step 4. And it looks like we subtracted 2x from each side. And that's how we got our negative 4x here. So that is the subtraction property of equality. And now, to get from step 4 to step 5, we're going to add 2 to each side of that equation, which will give us negative 4x equals 36. So that was the addition property of equality. And finally, x is being multiplied by -4. To isolate x, we need to divide both sides of that equation by -4 using the division property of equality. Now, great job. I hope this helped you get really good at using those tools in your algebra toolbox, those inverse operations, those basic properties. It's your turn to really be challenged. I want you to work on this. I'm not going to do it with you on the video because I want to see if anybody can come to school and surprise me, or whether you're a distance learner, you can send me a picture of it by email. But I'd really like to see you try this, and let's see if we can do that. And let's earn a bonus point that you can use on the next test if you can get it right and show your thinking. Let me know how you got there by showing me all the steps. Wonderful job, everybody, and I'll see you in class. Keep working hard.